Well, good evening. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to PechaKucha Night, Volume 34. This is awesome. This is I believe, our second sold-out night in a row that we've had, so thank you for all your support. I also want to take a moment and celebrate that today is the 1st of June. So as we welcome June, we also celebrate Pride here in Burlington. And yeah, absolutely. And we at PechaKucha Night proudly support very much the beautiful ways in which we love, in which we identify, the ways in which we express ourselves. And PechaKucha Night is a safe forum, it's a safe place for diverse audiences to come together and share stories and to share passion. So thank you for coming here, and thank you for supporting Pride. Now we're going to do what we almost always do at the very beginning is, can I see a show of hands for everyone whom this is the very first PechaKucha Night experience? Awesome. Awesome. Well, welcome to PechaKucha Night, and it looks like about almost half and half, maybe 40-60. And for those of you returning, thank you for your support. Welcome back. We're glad that you're here. So what is PechaKucha Night? What is it about? Well, PechaKucha Night is 20 years old this year. Started in 2003, and it was started by an American architecture firm in Japan. That operated in Japan. And according to them, now this is their opinions, their colleagues in the industry could be a little long-winded when it came to presentations. So they had an idea. What if we created a format? What if we made a format where they were limited to 20 slides? That sounds like a good idea. Wait a second. What if we took it a step further? And they could only talk for 20 seconds for each of those 20 slides. And one more thing, it'll move automatically. There's no override. So thus was born PechaKucha Night. So that's where we come up with our 640. So the length of the presentation is exactly 6 minutes and 40 seconds. It's kind of funny, I have to say, while I was putting together this presentation, I put this slide up, I thought, it might be time to Google 640, just because I was a little concerned. That it might reference some outdated Bible verse of some unfortunate social norms that were established 2,000 years ago. But actually, the nice thing is, if there are some biblical scholars here, John 6:40 is all about eternal life. So tonight you get live presentations, and there's a bonus of eternal life. So welcome. So today, PechaKucha is in 1,300 cities in over 140 countries around the world. As I mentioned, it was going since 2003. In Burlington, we started it in 2010 at the Fleming Museum. And we've had 34 volumes since then, and roughly the last count I had was about between 360 and 370 unique presentations. So that's awesome. And by the way, I've been saying PechaKucha Night, and if you've been coming for a while, and I know many of you have, you've heard that change a bit. It seems to change maybe every third event. And it's just because we get corrected every once in a while. And so for a while there, it was PechaKucha. We were told, no, it's PechaKucha. And then most recently, PechaKucha. My wife still calls it Pikachu. So we're sticking with PechaKucha Night for this evening. So I want to real quickly recognize some real special people. First of all, Mascoma Bank. So Mascoma Bank has been a partner with us since 2018. And that's when we kind of reimagined what PechaKucha Night could be here in Burlington. And we simply could not do this without their support. It's been tremendous. And you know, we at PechaKucha Night are passionate about, well, sharing passion. The folks at Mascoma Bank are clearly passionate about community. And so I wanted to invite Pete Jones here from Mascoma Bank, the market leader for Northern Vermont, just to say a couple words.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks for indulging just a few moments of words from the sponsor tonight. Mascoma Bank has been a presenting sponsor for about as long as we've been a certified B corporation. Actually, certified B came for us in about 2017, so give us about 6 years. And our vision statement really, I think, sums up what the bank is about, what we stand for, and why we feel it's important to support events like PechaKucha that promote creativity and diversity. And our vision statement says that Mascoma Bank will be a force for positive change for our customers, our communities, and our employees. And to that end, we devote significant financial resources to events like PechaKucha and to other sponsorships in Northern Vermont, Burlington specifically. Mascoma's 40 or so team members in this market are proud that the work we do, we're retail bankers and mortgage bankers and commercial bankers. We're proud that the work we do, banking every day, includes at its core an effort for us to also make our communities better. On behalf of our team here, I thank you for supporting PechaKucha. It's great to see everyone here tonight. I'm pleased to welcome everyone here. That 40%, I called it 45, but who's splitting hairs? That has never experienced PechaKucha. You're in for a delight. And as those of you who join Denise and myself in having the good fortune of experiencing a lot of PechaKucha nights, know you're in for a special evening. So welcome and thank you.
Thank you, Pete. And Pete, I did say Pete Jones, didn't I? You did. Okay. I got, for some reason, I was standing here in the corner. I was like, did I just say Pete Smith? No. Okay. Sorry. I also want to give a quick shout out to our longtime supporters. So there's the Media Factory. The Media Factory is here. You see these guys behind the cameras all over. They're filming the event. They've been doing this for us for almost since we began. And then they take all this footage, they bring it home, they work their magic and produce these wonderful videos that appear both on their channel and on the international channel. Solidarity of Unbridled Labor. They flex their substantial design muscles and help us with all of our materials, all of our branding, but they also do so much more in providing leadership and guidance for the organization. So Solidarity is a tremendous partner. And of course, 7 Days, and I think we all know, 7 Days has been with us since the number one, PechaKucha Night number one. And we all know that the creative sector of Burlington, Northern Vermont, even Vermont in general, just benefits so greatly from the fact that we have the wonderful newspaper in our community. Yeah, we want to thank you. Thank you so much for coming out and supporting what your neighbors, your family members, your friends, your coworkers who are up here presenting. And thank you for also coming and supporting who might be a stranger now, but we hope not for long, because these stories are special. They're special to the people that are sharing them, and I think you'll find that they'll become special for you too. And speaking of presenters, there they are. Yeah. We got 10 presenters tonight, and The way that it's going to work, our schedule is we're going to have 5 presenters, the 5 on the right hand of the screen first. Then we're going to take a short intermission, 15 minutes, no longer, I promise. And then we'll have the 5 presenters that are on the left side of the screen. So, are we ready to get started? Okay, so I'm going to invite now Annie Caswell up to the podium. I guess not a podium, to the stage. And you know, one thing I want you guys to give an extra little special applause, because it's never easy being the first one up here, and I get to. Yeah, thank you. I get to choose. So, the title of Annie's presentation is Sailing the High Seas, Not the Bikini Martini Tour. So, Annie, please come on up.
That's going off, right? Hello. Uh-oh. It's supposed to flip. I think I got it. You can go. My father asked me on my deathbed what I wanted to do with my life. I said I wanted to sail around the world. I was 17 and had never set foot on a sailboat. It all started back in 1987. I was 24 and struggling in Boston, working with a variety of artists. I came home to a recording on my answering machine that, Annie, do you want to come across the ocean with us? And I knew I was going to do it. I had 3 months to vacate my apartment, get gear, earn money, and I had $800, and there I went. So I didn't know if I'd like sailing or if I'd get seasick or if I had it in me to do such a thing. But the first boat would be a 42-foot Beneteau, sailing from New York to France. If one thinks it's a bikini martini trip, they'd be wrong. We had a week worth of storms, ripped the sail, and for 7 hours I popped my head up just so I wouldn't get seasick. A bird visited us and stayed overnight. It was all in French. We packed 200 cans of various vegetables, 30-plus boxes of cookies, 17 cartons of eggs, $154 worth of fresh veggies, 35 gallons of water, and more. Being on the open ocean is a sort of a meditation, a reminder of just how small we are, and a test of one's will to make it through tough times. 20-foot waves were the norm, a constant moving, sleep deprivation, and all the colors except for green. I remember going to the Azores, smelling the earth first, and then the wobbly legs. I had the sailing bug, discovering Europe along the way. We visited Gibraltar, Tangiers, many ports in Portugal, Spain, finally France. I went on to buy a small boat in the south of France with my partner. Brisailles and a tricked-up van was our home for a year. From there, I landed a small job transporting a boat to Greece and then working for Multicoque magazine. After 4 years, I needed to get back to the, I needed to get back to the USA, so I found a 59-foot Henry Wauquiez boat headed to New York City. I would be cook and crew. Only catch, there were 7 Frenchmen and me. That trip was a month, stopping in Madeira, Bermuda, and then New York. After so much time living on a sailboat, I wasn't quite ready for land living. I got a job transporting the same boat down to Newport. Now, there was green seas, and I did get seasick. I ate a cracker for 20 minutes, only to heave it overboard. I was first mate, so there was only other 2 crew, and so I was at the helm. I did get a great letter of recommendation. After about a year passed, I felt ready for an adventure again. I found myself on a small 32-foot catamaran. Long, funny story short, we headed off Dry Tortugas off Key West, Florida in 91. There were 5 Danish folks and me. This was another trip where I thought we were going to be lost at sea. We hit 30-foot waves, broke several instruments, including the steering, and we couldn't eat for 3 days. Some may say, why do we do this? Thrill of conquering Mother Nature. We made it to Mexico, sailed through 7 Belize Islands and up the Rio Dulce in Guatemala, where the woman and the Ooh. And women in the boat, boyfriends left. Years later, with a longing for warm weather, I landed a job as crew on a boat from New York to Tortola. I wanted the Caribbean life. This time a 52-foot boat catching mahi-mahi and no bikini martini. It was cold, November 1st. Bush got elected. I, sporting my foul weather gear, was on 4-hour watches at night all alone, hoping there were no squalls. Right. That was Freedom, New York to Tortola. I sailed around the Caribbean. Oh, oh, there's the monitor. Okay. Oh, boy. I sailed around the Caribbean while there for 15 years part-time. Visiting islands on day trips was different for me, yet the thrill remained. The hurricanes of 2018 brought 2 Category 5 storms, and with it, all the boats in the harbor. I remember the Mediterranean, having made it crossing in a 52-foot Hinckley, supposedly a wonderful boat, but day 2, the autopilot broke. So this is also when I thought I was lost it. My arms were sore, heavy seas, sleep deprivation. But, you know, I wanted to jump ship, but my partner helped me through my watches, so it was okay. We saw 3 water spouts that day. One night, a 20-foot wave pounded down on us. At the helm, pancaking my partner on the boat. There's one thing you don't want to do is fall overboard. And I thought it was the end of my sailing days, but no, I continued on and on. Yes, perhaps it was the hundreds of dolphins that played off the bow of the boat, perhaps the hundreds of sunsets and sunrises, and the thrill of adventure, maybe a pirate attack in the Mediterranean. But I went on to cross again in a 52-foot to Italy, stopping in the Azores. Then a 90-foot Pedrick design boat from France to Tunisia, a classic boat complete with a clawfoot bathtub and a wood stove. I did yoga on the boat, wrote journals, and we watched for whales because there were many of them. How could I pass up a Acapulco trip to San Diego? The Pacific Ocean was about keeping ahead of a hurricane on our tail and avoiding counted whales that were dangerously close and laughing sea lions resting on the buoys. And who doesn't want to sail the Great Lakes? Me. You can have that. Remember Edmund Fitzgerald? Yeah, the seas are nasty, the water's shallow, so it makes for nasty seas. And the cooking was always a challenge, but it always tasted fantastic. Back on Lake Champlain, I met a few friends who would take me out for day sails where land was in sight. It's been a year since I've been out, so I'm jonesing to go if anybody has a sailboat here. Have some stories. I made this PechaKucha not because I did something special, but because I want people to follow their dreams. I never knew riding a donkey in Portugal and then falling in love with them in St. John would lead me to painting them for several years. My journals have kept the memories alive for me, and I'm out of time. I'm sailing on the Rosalia project in 2 weeks for a cleaner ocean on American Promise, so I'm very excited about that.
All right, our next presenter this evening, Karen Guth, and her title of her presentation, Corner Store. Karen.
Yeah, I know, thanks. Oh my gosh, all right. Okay, I'm ready. There are a lot of former corner stores around Burlington that are now houses, and I happen to live in one of them. Here you can see an ad for my house for sale back in 1923. A 10-room house, grocery store, stock, and scales, all for $6,800. Here also is a picture of some of the original family of the house sitting on the store stoop. You might wonder what it's like living in a corner store. Well, I can tell you it's like living in a fishbowl, but in unexpected ways. My kitchen occupies the former store space, and here you can see the view. The windows sit just a few feet from the sidewalk, with all the daily activity right there. So the activity outside the windows is a constant part of our daily life inside the kitchen. I'm a photographer, and I really wanted to capture the feeling of living in the store and the contrast of the outside and inside worlds divided by just a clear window pane. I tried a few different methods and ultimately ended up setting my camera on a timer, and I'd set it to shoot different intervals depending on the day and the weather. I set it to shoot 1 picture per minute or 1 per hour or whatever I felt like. I would shoot out the window of my kitchen at different angles, and because I wanted to show the two worlds separated by the window pane, I would also turn the camera to shoot inside at the angle that someone would see if they looked in from the sidewalk. And each time I set the camera up, it would shoot until the memory card was full. So I would end up with hundreds of photos each time I did this. And then I'd dig through them looking for anything interesting. Remember, the camera was on a timer, not motion activated, so I would usually end up with a whole lot of photos of nothing. Here, the view of my computer screen shows this. There's lots of nothing there. Even if people were walking by my house, the camera didn't necessarily shoot at the moment a person was right in front of it. Occasionally I'd get interesting images though. These photos were from a Halloween several years ago. I liked how the images captured that night in a ghostly way, showing the outline of the kids' costumes. There's one dressed as Batman, there was maybe a person dancing, and I think there's a dad dressed up as Freddy Krueger. All of this was just a few feet outside of my kitchen. I'd get more abstract or interesting photos that weren't necessarily illustrating my project, but they were nice images nonetheless. Here the image resulted from reflections inside because my kitchen lights were on, plus the activity outside, so not only does it show a car going by, but it also shows the reflection of my actual camera in the window, along with the house across the street. There were times I'd been looking through hundreds of images, and really all I had was hundreds of photos of nothing. But when you looked at them all together, it was something. This was one rainy night where the camera shot maybe once an hour. I liked the reflections on the rain-covered street, the cars moving through, and the houses, all repeated, and as a composite, it was an image that I liked. But back to the project at hand, documenting what it's like to live in that former corner store. The foot traffic a few feet from my kitchen was frequent, though it varied by season and by event. I would look at images I got and notice patterns and group them as such, but the main pattern I noticed was that mostly no one looked in my windows. They just passed by a few feet from us and went on their way. Here was a guy who passed by my house a lot, so we ended up in many photos. These photos in particular bring up the oddness of how I would see the same people frequently, but there was no interaction with them. You felt like you knew them because you saw them every day, yet you didn't know them at all. You'd wondered, who were they, where were they going, but you never found out. Really, there was never interaction through the window, but if people had looked, they would have seen us living our daily lives there in that corner store. I mentioned I was also documenting at the same time what was going on inside my kitchen. Here are some of the images from when I would have the camera turned inside, again taking photos at random time intervals until the memory card was full. If these people had just looked up from their phones, they might have seen us having snacks or just hanging out, but really, I almost never encountered anyone looking inside. That was the most unexpected part of this project to me. In reality, comparing living in this corner store to what it must be like living in a fishbowl needs clarification. Here, no one is tapping on the glass, peering in at us. I only twice captured photos of people looking in, or at least looking at the camera, which, by the way, was in absolutely plain view. I never hid it. And so here, if they were looking into the windows, we were there having dinner, or my daughter was having a dance lesson. We were living our lives in full view, except I did have window blinds that I closed sometimes. Being in that kitchen/former corner store is almost like watching a movie. Life just passing by, no one ever looking into the windows, no interaction through the glass, and that could create a weird sense of isolation. Here I am having a cup of coffee, reading the paper. Had someone looked in, they would have seen this, or they might have seen me looking back out at them. Sometimes this window separating me from the world outside was too much. On a night when there was a big event and I was home, the activity right outside my window could really create a feeling of social isolation. The window created this weird sense of being cut off from the world. This to me is one of the really surprising things about living in the corner store. I did this project off and on over several years, and I liked the patterns I found and how images look grouped in the grid format. So I started posting the images on Instagram. And at first I got the requisite likes, but soon it turned really dark. And trolls saying I was a creep, how weird I was, why would I do this, and that what I was doing was illegal. But photographing people in public places is not illegal, and it's not illegal to post the images on the internet or show them publicly, But I didn't want to engage with the trolls or give them any energy, so I took the photos down. And I've never really done anything with them. So I started looking through the images recently, and I thought PechaKucha might be a good way to show the project. And when I look back through the images, I enjoy seeing that pre-COVID time capsule when people actually went to work and when they went to events. The foot traffic has changed outside my windows since COVID, but it still feels like I live in a fishbowl. People still walk by a few feet from my kitchen, hunched over in the winter, scurrying to their destinations, mostly looking down at the ground. And then in the spring and summer, people obviously enjoy themselves more, taking slower walks and enjoying the weather. I always like the image of this woman who stopped to take a photo right in front of my window, and my camera randomly photographing her at that very moment. I think she was taking a selfie. And then there's the woman gliding by on her longboard, just as cool as can be. So I ended up with over 12,000 photos in this project, and finding anything interesting was like looking for a needle in a haystack. This image is my favorite and made all the thousands of photos of nothing worth it. So I encourage you all, when you walk around Burlington, to put your phones in your pockets. Try to find former corner stores because they're everywhere, and maybe peek in a window now and then.
Thank you, Karen. All right. Our next presenter, Don Slish, and the topic of his presentation, psychedelics, not your father's hallucinations.
Okay, so I have given this talk before, and I usually get an hour and 15 minutes to do it. So strap in, okay? Okay, so when I think about, I was born in 63, so when I think about psychedelics in the 60s, I think tune in, drop out, whatever. Just a bunch of hippies having sex, doing drugs, and annoying the greatest generation, okay? But when I was coming up in the 70s, this is what LSD was, right? They all told you if you did LSD, you're going to jump off a building. You're going to think you're flying, but you're actually going to die. And then in 71, our favorite president, Nixon, made even experimenting with them illegal. So you couldn't do anything with psychedelics for 30 years, 35 years. Psychedelics, we're talking about LSD, psilocybin, and DMT. DMT has got a really short half-life. So ayahuasca is basically DMT with a MAO inhibitor in it that allows it to last longer. Basically, all these three things do exactly the same thing. So they're just different ways of activating the same receptor, which is your 5-HT2A. It's one of 11 serotonin receptors in your brain. Basically what happens is normally serotonin is released on these receptors, which then causes more glutamate release from a glutamate axon. And glutamate is stimulatory, so you get more stimulation. These receptors are mainly in your sensory and cognitive areas, and they just give you stimulation everywhere in your brain all at once, and just where those receptors are, but everywhere in the brain. What does that mean? What does that do? I forget my next slide. Oh, so anyway, when the trip starts, basically what's happening is it's stimulating your occipital lobe. So your occipital lobe says there's something out there to look at, doesn't know what to do with it, it just makes a pattern out of it. So that's where you get these weird patterns and colors and stuff. This is not part of the therapy, this is just one of the things that happens. The real part that is growth producing is the depersonalization that happens at the peak. So basically, it's an out-of-body experience where you get self-reflection. And this is the classic thing they say, I saw God, that kind of a thing. Basically, you lose all sense of yourself and you're just in the experience at the time. That's the cognitive aspect. So cognition, what is that? We've got two main networks of cognition. One's the default mode, when your mind is relaxed and you're kind of thinking about yourself and relaxing. Task positive is the flow state, when you're working on something really seriously and you forget about yourself. Default mode, and then each of these have got very specific areas in the brain where they're located and specific tracks that the communication goes through. These are well-worn tracks. This is what you're doing as you're growing up, is learning how to think properly. And this is kind of makes your brain really efficient so you can think quickly and well. And these tracks get well worn because of neuroadaptation. Neurons that fire together wire together. So the more you think in these patterns, the stronger those patterns get, and those are the ones you're going to use most of the time. So those are the cognitive pathways we use on a regular basis. So the downside, though, with this neuroadaptation is in depression, you get caught in these loops of negative thoughts. You know, you feel bad, and you feel bad about feeling bad, and you get caught in this loop, and you can't get out of it. All you can do is think about how depressed you are, and you can't do anything task positive. You can't do anything. And that's a loop between your amygdala, which is your emotion center of the brain, and your medial prefrontal cortex here, which is part of the default mode network. So you're stuck in this loop of thinking about yourself and how crappy you feel. That's all depression is. How do you get out of that? Well, here's a kind of a representation of connections in your brain normally. So these are the strengthened pathways of that default mode and the task positive mode. You've got very defined pathways that make it really efficient, and rigid ways of thinking, more or less. This is what psilocybin does. Boom. Okay, it opens all of this up. You've got stimulation everywhere, and things are just going. So what happens is you've got all kinds of pathways opening up, mind expansion, and this is where that spiritual awakening happens. And you get the loss of sense of self. And another thing psilocybin does, so anyway, a good way to think about this, sorry I got lost there. A good way to think about this is kind of like a snow hill. It's like, this is your normal way of cognition. This could be your depressed pathway. And you keep taking that path the same way every time. On a snow hill, it's really hard to get out of that path. Psilocybin is like 2 feet of snow. Boom, all the paths are filled in. What does that mean? It means you can make new paths now. Okay, you're not going to be stuck in those same paths. You've got the opportunity to find new ways of thinking. And another thing psilocybin does is it increases neuroadaptation, which means not only can you make new connections, you can strengthen those connections really quickly and really easily. So once you get this, you're in this therapy where you're making new ways of cognitively thinking, you can strengthen those pathways really quickly. And like I say, you're not going out in the woods and getting stoned. It's part of a therapy. Okay, so you've got preparation, you've got the trip itself, and then most importantly, post-treatment. Assimilating that experience and integrating it, making sure the pathways are strong and they're going to work for you. And does it work? This is depression. This is therapy. This is your SSRI. This is psilocybin, okay? That's 2 weeks after using it, okay? And this is 3 months after one trip, all right? This is taking that drug every single day, and it's not as good. So what does it do? Basically, significant decreases in anxiety and depression, improvements sustained for greater than 6 months from one experience, opens these new pathways, and you've got that neuroadaptation and therapy to strengthen those new pathways to get you out of that bad way of thinking and into a more healthy way of thinking. I did it.
Okay, Don, I'm sold.
I'm not selling it.
All right, our next presenter and the final presenter before the intermission with a presentation titled Chalking Days is Amity Femia.
Ooh, yeah. Hi. That's good. Yeah. All right. All right, vamala. Chalking days is about spending days making chalk art, but also about chalking up days, as in counting them, which is how the work started. When the pandemic hit, my daughter Thea was in 4th grade, and chalking on the sidewalk was one of the things kids could still do together. I'm a graphic designer specializing in educational exhibits. I love street art and murals, public communication on a large scale. The pandemic brought new messages to our feet. Stay 6 feet apart, wash your hands, call grandma. My version turned into a daily sidewalk meditation and time-passing goal. One chalk spiral a day for 100 days, starting the day the schools closed. I was excited to find that Crayola makes a box of 64 colors of chalk, and that I could paint with it using water and a foam brush. I restarted with the last number of spirals every time it rained, and I never made it to 100. This would have been the entirety of my presentation had it not been for a conversation with my friend Laura. At Oakledge with her one day, I started drawing with charcoal left from a fire, and later went back and added color. I told her about some things I was noticing on the ground. She encouraged me to follow them. I often stop to stretch here at Smalley Park after my morning runs, and to wonder at the alignment of stone bench to center circle of basketball court. Taken alone, it was a beautifully meditative composition. I wanted to use it as a base and add to it. I made sketches on paper, and finally one morning I arrived with my chalk and water. 3 hours later, a basketball mandala was born. Being chalk and temporary, I felt fine about not asking anyone's permission to do this, though I did call a few friends to take a look. And I enjoyed watching people interact with it a bit. Here, basketball is the sport of the cosmos, and court visitors who rolled over it with their wheels, there's Thea again, created shooting star paths. For me, it was a breakthrough, a doorway into creating art that was 4 things: outdoor, public, site-specific, and temporary. Working in chalk expands location possibilities, and I continued with the idea of adding to the everyday environment, integrating my work into things that are right in front of us, but that we might not normally notice. I didn't want to decorate these things, but wanted to follow their lines to grow them into something new that people could discover and wonder about, even if it was temporary. I just read an article in 7 Days about a chalk artist. The author described working in chalk as gutsy and zen. And it's true, you can't get attached to the result. But this one I was so ready to make on the corner of Catherine and Caroline Streets. I had my window of time to work, but the rain barely let me finish. Thankfully, I can record it with photos. Not the same as happening upon it in person like you would with this one at Red Rocks, overlooking Juniper Island. But still, it gets a sort of continued life this way. The photos can also make you wonder what it is you're looking at. When the chalk is on the rock ledges, the photos can really confuse scale wonderfully. This one looks huge, but it's not really. In addition to chalk, light is also temporary. So is season and weather. I was interested in using the temporary medium of chalk to capture the even more temporary nature of shadows. On the left, I traced shadows of trees during the day and realized it was really hard to keep up with the sun. I had slightly better luck with the shadows cast by steady streetlights, though it was cold work and dark. In the light of the next day, I wasn't quite sure what I had made. Also in winter, I added to the patterns that form from sidewalk salt that melts and refreezes. I call them salt flowers. My challenge was to add to their delicate lines without making them disappear. These were really fun for getting double takes, what was there and what was added. And of course, the melting of the final snows and the coming of the light inspired some spring pieces. The left one lets you imagine the flow of water downhill from the snowbank, maybe bringing some plant life with it. On the right, the melt is more of a splat. I made some quicker studies at smaller scale, leaving for my morning run to the lake with my phone in just 2 colors, black and white, in my pocket, finding small shapes, angles, and directions in the rocks, and adding as little as possible, just what was needed to bring them out. I got mostly positive comments when I shared these photos and when people would pass me while I was working, though they were mixed with some concerns about the chalk dust getting into the lake. And some people just thought a natural landscape should be left well enough alone, regardless of whether the marks were temporary. But one morning, I returned to find a real permanent piece of what I would call graffiti, in a negative sense, on the rock near where I had made some drawings the previous day. A tag, someone's name, but it was just a little too similar to what I was doing. It really stopped me in my tracks and made me wonder, was I encouraging graffiti? Was I engaging in it myself? I thought about finding more remote places, maybe only accessible by kayak. You can see a little charcoal drawing I did here at the bottom if you look closely. But the scale was dizzying, and the surfaces I could reach were pretty rough and slimy. Still, I continue to be inspired by the big rocks. I love imagining what I could do working with their patterns, and maybe a long pole or a floating ladder. Or maybe I could make full-size images of them as part of an indoor exhibit on local geology. Again, a question of scale and time. Until then, I go back to my sidewalk, where I can experiment and make pieces with more detail and complexity, close to home, over a period of days, as long as the rain holds off. Someday, I'd like to do a mural with paint.
We're getting ready here for round 2, and we're going to kick it off with Mark Lilienthal, whose presentation is Burgundy wine. So simple, so beautiful, so complicated. Mark.
Messieurs, dames, bonsoir. Petite question à vous poser. Tout d'abord, qui serait intéressé par la possibilité de devenir un véritable expert dans le vin de Bourgogne dans 6 petites minutes? Here's a guarantee for you from this former wine guide in France. When we're done, everyone in this room will be more knowledgeable about Burgundy wines than 99.99% of the world's population. Yes, that includes the French. Burgundy is a magical, beautiful, charming, daunting region in eastern France. Tonight, we're going to divide it into 3 categories: good news, bad news, and really bad news. But let's start with the good news. In order to become an expert in this, one only has to master 2 fundamental facts. The first of which is that when we are talking about drinking, celebrating, and enjoying white Burgundy wine, we are talking about wine grown from 100% Chardonnay grapes. And when we are talking about red Burgundy wine, we are talking about 100% Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir for red, Chardonnay for white, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir. Your accent may vary, but the facts never change. The most famous corridor is called the Route des Grands Crus, which runs north to south in this region, which produces only 2.6% of France's overall wine output and just a paltry 0.4% of global production. The harvest happens in late summer, early fall, typically by hand, by small winemakers who run family operations, sometimes operating with only 1 or 2 or 3 rows in a single vineyard. This is my friend Jean-Baptiste celebrating the end of the 2014 harvest. Isn't it amazing that after only a few slides, we all know what type of grape he is holding in his left hand because we've been paying close attention. We divide the wines into 4 different categories. We start with the bottom of the pyramid, which is the regional wines. We take a grape from over here and a grape from over here, and we mash them up and we make them into the same bottle, and we call it regional wine. As we go up the pyramid, things get a little bit more complicated. But for now, before things get off the rails here, let's remember the first 2 rules. When we're talking about white wine, we're talking about Chardonnay grapes, and when we're talking about red wine, we're talking about Pinot Noir, right? So far, so good? Yeah, I know. And you can feel that shoe is out there, hanging in midair, getting ready to tumble down with its inexorable thud, signaling the arrival of the dreaded bad news. Because there are over 100 names that we call Burgundy wines, and very few of them are Chardonnay, and even fewer are Pinot Noir. So if you look at the constellation of words on these labels, only the trained and expert and experienced eye in Burgundy would know that they all come from this region. Next up the pyramid, we have our village wines, in this case, Chablis, which is made from Chardonnay grapes, all grown inside the town of Chablis. If it were a red wine from Volnay, we would call it a Volnay, named after the village. Okay? As we continue to climb, we get into the Premier Cru. And the Premier Cru, we've gone from regional to village. We're now in a specific parcel, in a specific village, in a very specific region of eastern France where we make Burgundy wines. And then at the very tip of the pyramid, we get to what's called Grand Cru, which come from some of the most venerated soils in all of wine. Here at the top, the true wine nerd or the Burgundy aficionado can amuse themselves memorizing all 33 names for just the Grand Cru. That's a lot. But the good news is we don't need any of that information to enjoy Burgundy wine. We just swirl, sniff, and sip. Anybody over the age of 21 can do it. It's really not that complicated. But at the top, we talked about good news, bad news, and really bad news. These are the 8 most expensive wines in the world. You guessed it, they all come from Burgundy. In fact, 45 of the 50, according to one recent survey, do. Recently, at a celebratory event, my wife had the great pleasure of drinking this Grand Cru. She brought the bottle home as a souvenir, inspiring my jealousy. We estimated its cost at $6,000. She did not pay for it, and we are still married. But fear not, Burgundy wine need not send us to the poorhouse or even to this graveyard in the middle of the vineyards of Burgundy. With strategic buying and proper storage, it can lead to decades of enjoyment, fun, and pleasure around a table and in a glass. I hope that after our time here together, you'll find some time in your life to experiment and explore and enjoy these fine nectars. But please don't tell anybody else. They're expensive enough already. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Mark. All right, our next presenter, Brittany Winfield, karaoke as an art of self-expression. Yeah.
They didn't expect a 5-foot-tall person to stand, even with platform flip-flops. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate you. Oops. You're good. We're good. Who's ready for some karaoke? In 1971, a very brave bar owner in Japan introduced the world to a brand new form of entertainment called karaoke. And the word karaoke is, of course, derived from the Japanese language, meaning empty orchestra. But I'd like to challenge you to think about this. If the humans that are standing in front of you as you are on the main stage are singing with you and at you, could they be seen as instruments to help elevate your performance? Is your orchestra truly empty? That bar must be full with instruments of all different varieties. And just a few doors down the street, we have the privilege of having one of the original karaoke establishments, JP's Pub, who opened their doors to karaoke in the Burlington karaoke culture and nightlife in 1991. And yes, folks, that's older than I am. And over the course of those 30 plus years, they have seen thousands of names being added to the queue to sing next. They've heard thousands of different songs of all different genres, and they've seen so many different personalities take the main stage. And tonight, I'm here to retell some of those stories. So the first personality type of the karaoke goer, because you don't need to have a professional singing voice, right? We're all in it together. The first one is the duet, the lovebirds. Those individuals, as soon as they pick up the microphones and lock eyes, no matter if they're singing their wedding song or a song that just means a lot to them, they're the only ones on stage and nobody else exists. I got chills, they're multiplying. Yes, they are retelling our favorite romantic comedies right in front of us. And to them, it's date night. And even more so, it's a public display of affection. Our next type of karaoke goer is my personal favorite because I think this is where I fall in to play. And this is the diva. This is the belter. This is the person who might have been a former theater queen and just never made it to Broadway, but this is their stage, and you best believe it. In the next 3 to 4 minutes, you are in for a freaking show. Because they're going to own it. They're going to pick the best feminist pop song they could think of. Man, I feel like a woman, and you all are about to see why. And of course, there are also people using this as a form of self-expression. So there may be individuals who this is their therapy, and that's okay. Maybe they had a heartbreak, and they're about to sing a heartbreak song, a breakup song, and take back their feelings. Just get it out and expel so they can take on the weekend ahead. Our next type of karaoke goer is... This is the denier, the newcomer. Personally, this is a challenge for them. You know, the first time they step up to karaoke in the spotlight, it's like, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, tequila. But then, by their second, their third, their 10th time on stage, don't stop believing. Honey, I never stopped believing in you, but that was an amazing progression from the first time I saw you last week. So kudos to you. But yet again, they've got regulars. They're just coming in, and they keep doing their thing. And the next form is friend groups. These are the folks. I had the privilege of going down to JP's to prepare for this speech right during UVM graduation. So to hear the friends celebrating the ending of finals, graduation, and we talked about eternity, right? 640. Well, they were making eternal memories that would then carry them on to the next chapters of their lives. They're having fun, and who knew? It might have been a reunion of the Spice Girls, and we just never knew we were going to get that show tonight. So that's pretty cool. I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want, and that is for you to have as much fun as these folks are having on stage. But in this friend group, there might be a non-singer. Da, da, da. This is the person where you see them nodding, you see their lips moving up and down, but nothing's coming out. But that's okay, because they have the support of their friends, and they're here just to make memories that will last them and carry them on to the next chapter. And of course, it's this wonderful host's job to keep the energy in the room, whether that be to slow down the crowd so they don't get a little too rowdy, or to pick them back up, picking up the beats per minute. They slide into the queue, so that way they are able to shift the energy in the room, and that, my friends, is a very powerful job to have. But nobody saw this guy coming, the wild card. You never know what's going to come out of his mouth, but here he goes. Back pocket, Neil Diamond, you know the beat. Sweet Caroline, bum, bum, bum. You know the one. And guess what? Everybody's going to be buying him rounds afterwards. But there are 3 rules to remember when it comes to karaoke etiquette. 1, no booing. This is a safe space for everybody to express themselves. 2, tip your bartenders. They are staying up way longer than they should be every single night in order to provide for you. And 3, remember that we're here to make memories. So PechaKucha 34, I'd like to invite everybody in this room to create a memory with me tonight. And for the next 40 seconds, we are going to sing together. Be loud, and it's okay. So I invite you, you all know this tune, sing as loud as you can, and let's go. We are the champions, my friends. We'll keep on fighting to the end. Louder! We are the champions. We are the champions. No time for losers, 'cause we are the champions of the world. Thank you so much. You've been amazing.
How fun was that? Yeah. I think that's the first time. Am I right, PechaKucha team? Yeah, I think that's the first time PechaKucha Night karaoke. All right. So our next presenter coming up, Owen Foley, how to perform a wedding. Owen.
I know when I came up on that stage, you guys saw me and assumed that is the person who I want to ask questions about planning a wedding. But I have a fun fact for you. Do you know that when you're at a wedding altar, you need to put your left hand over the right hand so that people can see whether or not you're wearing a wedding ring? It's the type of thing I picked up after the first 2 or 3 dozen weddings. I don't know if I'm at 3 dozen. I counted 35, but I'm reasonably sure I forgot one. And over the years, I'm not 100% sure why I keep getting invited back to some of these. Friends and family and people I haven't seen before their wedding for several years decided to bring me because I apparently am fun and capable of doing weird things. Before one stretch of 5 weddings in 7 weeks, I decided to go online and register to become a minister, just in case. You know, maybe the priest gets some sort of food poisoning, or he goes out and something falls through. And then someone called my bluff. Now I've performed 6 weddings, and I'm here to share some tips with the rest of you. The first thing you really need to do is start your planning. You're going to have to sit down, call to figure out what you need to do to make a bespoke wedding for your friends. What do they want? Does he want to be called Jonathan, even though you've called him John for the past decade? Like, do they want to do the sisters coming together to do a reading, or the moms coming together to pour wine to signify the unifying of the families? Do they want fast and straightforward, or do they want traditional or religious fire and brimstone? Whatever it is, I can do it. So after figuring out what they want and the basic parameters, you have to write a sermon. And you have to find a way to walk the line between something dry and boring and a best man speech. Whatever you do, I highly recommend that you talk about their dogs. It always gets everybody. Talk about their history, talk about their future, but definitely the dogs. And the thing that they don't tell you when you're setting up to plan a wedding is there's a reason why boat captains do this. You need to have a certain bearing to you. And I'm going to overuse this boat captain metaphor, just forewarning. Because you're asked to do a lot of things that you wouldn't normally think would be involved in part of the job. You thought it was just standing up there and giving a talk, which I can do on short notice. You have to be responsible. Even though you've hollowed out your wedding Bible and put a flask inside, you can't imbibe because you are the only one with a speaking part during the entire ceremony. And beyond that, you serve as the liaison between the friends and the family and everybody else. You need to keep everybody relaxed and make sure that they sign their paperwork. And then try to make sure that everyone's boutonniere is on correctly, which is a challenge in the slightest. And then you need to make sure that everyone shows up at the right time and is standing on the right spots with their left hand over their right hand and their boutonniere on straight, because the main event is about to start. And the most important thing is that you really need to steel yourself, because when the bride starts coming down the aisle, the waterworks start, and you are not allowed to cry. No one wants a sobbing officiant. Because you have the best seat in the house. You were going to attend that wedding anyway. But now you're standing there seeing your friend come towards you, and you have a chance to be a part of their special day. So you have to get ready to go for it. And you have to give a sermon that you delivered directly from your heart, that again is not a best man speech. The type of thing that draws on heartstrings, while also bringing to the fact that you just found out that Beth was short for Elizabeth when you were signing their paperwork. And you need to have everything planned, no matter what happens, and be able to roll with the punches while not doing a make-em-up improv-style wedding. Try to stay on book whenever possible. Because you're making a memory for these folks that they're going to have for the rest of their life. The type of thing that they're going to put on their wall or show their kids. The type of thing that people will look back on for years. But ironically, no one is going to remember a single thing that you said. They'll remember the fact that you were fun, or that it was short, or that it was really hot that day, or what people were wearing, or what the food was like. But they're not going to remember the exact words you say. If they do, they're weird, and don't worry about them. They want you to be out there and be a part of that special day. But you also want to be aware of this photographer, because there's a lot of pictures that people will look back on, and no one wants an officiant directly behind them during their first kiss going like this. So you plan, and you figure out where people are supposed to be. And you know that you can make it through this. Because as important as to you, it's far more important for everyone else. And when you hand off that microphone to the DJ, you are no longer the captain. You have been demoted. But this is still important. And these people, you don't own their wedding. You don't own it whether it goes till death or until divorce. You just need to be there for them as their friends. And if you do a good job, people are going to tell you for years that they want you to perform their wedding. Unfortunately, this couple wasn't able to do it because the red state legislators decided that they were more worried about what was under Venus's skirt than the love that these two shared. So as a reminder, on the first day of Pride, love is love, people are people, and marriage is sacred. Thank you. And now, by the power vested in me, by the Universal Life Church Online Monastery and the great state of Vermont, I now pronounce you able to perform a wedding. Thank you.
Thanks, Owen. All right, our next presenter, and I'm kind of bummed. We're kind of getting close to the end here. It's been such a wonderful night. Our next presenter, Kate Longmaid, gathering up the fragments, painting the transient nature and beauty of life. Kate.
All right, we can begin. This presentation was inspired by Susan Cain's book, Bittersweet: How Sorrow and Longing Make Us Whole. Cain's observations about life and the creative process resonated with me deeply in my work, both as a therapist and as an artist. I will share ways as an artist I've sought to express states of longing, poignancy, and beauty in my paintings. My story begins, as all our stories begin, with a sense of wonder. That sense of wonder is at the heart of my creative process. As an artist, I'm drawn to subject matter that is ephemeral. Captured in fleeting moments, these paintings reflect on the transient nature and beauty of life. Susan Cain defines bittersweetness as a tendency to states of longing, poignancy, and sorrow, an acute awareness of the passing time, and a curiously piercing joy at the beauty of the world. My nature is grounded in the bittersweet orientation. At the heart of Cain's book is the idea of embracing the dualities of light and dark, life and death, bitter and sweet, and transforming pain into creativity, transcendence, and love. The title of my presentation, Gathering Up the Fragments, draws from the Kabbalah, the mystical version of Judaism, which teaches all of creation was once a vessel filled with golden light. But it shattered, and now the shards and fragments of divinity are scattered everywhere amidst the suffering, pain, and ugliness. Our task is to gather up these fragments wherever we find them. Art, along with music, poetry, and other forms of creative expression, is a portal for accessing beauty and self-transcendence. Painting is one of the ways I gather up the fragments. My art is my creative offering. I'm inspired by nature. Photographing nature informs my painting. I'm drawn to patterns, subtle plays of color, the juxtaposition of textures, the mystery of reflections. I generally paint from life, whether in the studio or outdoors. With plein air painting, I'm immersed in the experience of being present, engaged in the act of seeing, elevated by an intimate encounter with nature and life. The act of painting from life is grounded in the fleeting, transient nature of experience. The flowers will droop and wither. I will lose the light. The landscape will change over a matter of hours or days. I have only this moment, a lesson for life. I began this painting within days of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. I wiped out sections and became interested in what emerged. In retrospect, I think the painting was a response to the war. Glimmers of light, darkness, obscured and obliterated forms, and amidst it all, a fragile beauty. The painting evolved. Out of destruction, literal and metaphorical, vibrant new life emerged. I named it Reawakening, a reference to the amaryllis that produces a second flowering, and the resurrection of beauty and hope in the wake of destruction and despair. Notice the collateral beauty. It's the profound connection to everything. That's actually a quote from the movie Collateral Beauty. So often we are preoccupied with collateral damage. Perhaps in part, the role of the artist is to also look for collateral beauty, even during times of great darkness. More recently, I've been experimenting with ways of using photography to create a painting. I've also been playing with reworking the image, reducing sections of the painting to its essence, perhaps a solid band of color, finding fresh and new ways to approach the genre of still life. I often return to subject matter, working in series, finding fresh ways to render what I'm seeing. These landscapes are about finding beauty in the familiar, the ordinary, and the everyday. Regardless of the subject matter, I'm seeking to capture the light. Sometimes the process feels like assembling a jigsaw puzzle, seeing the visual field as a collection of shapes and colors. My art is my language, my offering, my invitation to join me, if only for a moment, in that sense of wonder and awe, to encounter the beauty all around us. My paintings are an invitation to gather up these shards, to experience the longing for connection with the natural world and a beauty that transcends us. This recent painting coming up was inspired by a floral arrangement for a neighbor's memorial service. The painting became a way of honoring his memory and also a meditation on life and death. It is infused with a tender, bittersweet feeling of loss, while evoking the promise of spring and new life. My hope is to share an experience of beauty through my art and awaken a sense of longing in the face of life's darkness and uncertainty. It's an act of creation, my gift to the world, a call to notice the collateral beauty, the bittersweet that connects us with our deepest longings. Thank you.
Okay, we've reached the last presenter of the evening. Our last presenter is Tommy Hyde. Join the movement, free your hips. Let's welcome Tommy.
Can everyone see me if I'm here? All right, it feels really good to be down on some ground I can skate on. My hips were getting so tight in that seat. It feels good to be up. All right, I'm ready to go. Our journey begins as all great epics do at Burning Man. I'm right there with the glasses on, and we are on the precipice of a much-anticipated life experience, and thank you, Dawn, for teeing this up, dropping acid for the first time. Now, for those of you who are familiar with Burning Man, you'll know it's a pop-up community of 70,000 people deep in the Nevada desert, complete with monumental sculpture art, cars shooting lasers, and yes, a giant burning effigy. But perhaps the most succinct way to describe it is that it's essentially an acid trip without the acid. So if you take a psychedelic there's something called the law of exponents, and that really comes into play. It was a lot to handle. Lots of colors, lots of shapes, lots of movement. It felt like I couldn't quite hang on. So as I was hanging on the back of a tandem bike with my friend Benji, he said, "Tom, what do you need?" And Burning Man's a place where everything's happening everywhere all at once. And the answer came quick. I said, "Benj, I need disco music." In all this EDM, disco is my favorite music, and I really wanted to reconnect with those roots. So, sure enough, we come upon the Black Rock roller disco, which is by now looking about this. I feel like I'm in a 90s era video game. And I grab a pair of skates, and I lace them up, and they're feeling real good. And I'm like, something's happening here. And I kick off, and if you've seen that scene in Ratatouille where the critic takes a bite of food and he's rocketed back to his childhood, that's what happened to me. I grew up a hockey goalie, and so these movements of backwards, forwards, in and out, those are all very second nature because you're focused on catching pucks and not, where you are. And so as I came back into my body, as Don said, I think I might have seen God. This experience of roller skating to funk music, it was like I had been secretly preparing for this moment for my entire life, and I was only just now realizing it. And so I needed to find the person who was responsible for this great gift, and I met David Miles Jr., a.k.a. the godfather of skate, and this hero brings 1,000 square feet of roller disco floor out to Burning Man every year, along with hundreds of skates to give that experience to more people than just myself. And he hails from San Francisco, where he took an old church in the Tenderloin and converted it into the Church of Eight Wheels. I went to this place, and it's so cool because in such a city at odds with itself at times, you could see a really amazing cross-section of the population grooving. And so as I was coming down off of acid in a plane at sunrise, 5,000 feet over Burning Man with a pilot I met on the dance floor, I thought to myself two things. One, you probably don't need to do acid ever again. And two, it'd be pretty cool to start a community roller disco movement in Burlington. Fast forward a few years, and it's the middle of the pandemic. I'm camped out in the Adirondacks, frequenting Stewart's, doing goofy things with my friends. And this idea really started to germinate. And, it would be so nice if I just had a little cash to pull it off. And in comes the economic impact payment. And so it was obvious what I was going to do with that. I was going to set a Google News alert and just look for roller discos that are going out of business, which is such a tragedy, but that was happening left and right. All these in-person businesses were not making it. And sure enough, the Roller Garden, just outside Minneapolis, Minnesota, was closing after 50 years. And I shot him a message, and sure enough, the skates were going up for auction. So I deposited my check, got out my computer, and prepared to enter my first online auction ever. I assumed the skates would be sold in lots of 20 or 30, but no, they were all listed individually. So over the course of 8 hours, I bid on individual skates. It was very exciting, I'm sad to admit. And when the dust settled, I had purchased 69 pairs of roller skates. That doesn't sound like a lot, but that is 138 individual skates, enough to completely fill a Toyota Camry. And of course, they're now marooned in Minnesota, and so I'm trying to figure out how I can get out there cheaply. Long story short, lots of tangential connections. Someone goes and grabs them. Another person's dad grabs them in a U-Haul truck. They make it to a farm in Pittsford, Vermont, and then I take them into my basement for the past 2.5 years. Sorry, Marnie, for these things getting in our way to go to the laundry. Certainly no good community roller disco is going to make it without a marketing arm. I took the Iskra screen printing class last spring. And shout out to Iskra. And I really wanted to make something, and a friend in the class has suggested, oh, why don't you make a poster for your event? And I was surprised by how stern my reaction when I said, it's not a goddamn event, it's a movement. And so was born a Soviet-era propaganda campaign, which you might start seeing around town with the call to action to join the movement and free your hips. And all kidding aside, to be totally transparent, that's why I'm here tonight. I'm calling on all of you to join the movement and free your hips. These skates have yet to be unveiled on the Burlington waterfront, and in a way, you are all now also on the precipice of a very exciting life experience. So, on the solstice, 6 p.m. onwards, come out to the Community Roller Disco. If you don't know where this location is, I highly suggest you hop on a tandem bike and follow the sound of disco music. Thank you.
Wow, right? What a great night. Let's give it up. One more round of applause for our presenters. So great. So great. I think one of the common threads actually through all these presentations was the passion and the beautiful way that everybody shared their passion. And that's why I come here and stay involved in PechaKucha. That's why I think PechaKucha is so special, is because it's a time for us to come together and share passion. And passion is about love, right? It's about talking about what we love. And in an age of so much divisive rhetoric, isn't it nice to come together and talk about what we love. So yeah. So I know you guys want to see these again, and I know you probably want to see other presentations that you missed. So Media Factory, you can come and see all the presentations that are filmed and by volume. You can also see them at the International PKN site. And this is all thanks to our friends at the Media Factory. So thank you, Media Factory. You know you wanna, right? Right? It's been since the first presentation, right? It's been kind of circling in the brain like, oh, can I get up there and do that? Well, you can, and we can help, okay? We love to help. You know, if it's about learning how to do it, how to get your slides together, whatever it is, whatever may be intimidating, let us know because we'd love to help you get up here and share your passion. So, and if you're interested in learning more, there's a couple ways of doing it. You can find anybody who's wearing one of these 640 shirts, Yay Eternity. And you can go to our all-new website that is full of information. Or there's even like cards. I've been told to hold one up. Even have these cards at the back that have a QR code that can lead you to more information. So there's lots of ways to learn more. But please, just reach out. Sometimes the best way is to talk to somebody and find out more about it. So, and lastly, thanks again to our sponsors, our wonderful sponsors. Couldn't do it without you. And then I also want to thank our volunteers. So these guys come together. We meet frequently. There's a lot of work that actually goes on, but I couldn't be prouder to be part of a group that's as fun, creative, and dedicated as this group is. And you know what? I'm going to embarrass somebody right now because I want to call one person out. There's one person that I think is kind of a behind-the-scenes hero that organizes a lot of this for us, gets all the communications out. A lot of you who presented tonight stayed in communications with her. Heather Winther is really an all-star for us. And if you ever tried to herd a group of creatives in one direction, you know how challenging that can be. So it's awesome. And then lastly, stay in touch. These are some of our social media channels, but we would love to have you come back and visit with us again on Thursday, October 5th for our next PechaKucha Night. And thank you all. Thank you all for your support. Thanks for coming out. Have a great evening.